But I think it's so important to understand that this is how Jesus looks at death. See, a lot of us look at death totally different than how Jesus talks about it. Our physical death is, Jesus refers to as going to sleep, guys. That's how he sees it. In the same way you go to sleep and you wake up, that's what it's like for us when we die. We need to wrap our heads around that. And then actually we should apply that through the rest of Scripture when we see death and dying and stuff like that. Okay, so now when Jesus came, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles off, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them concerning their brother. So when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and she met him, but Mary remained seated in the house. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would have not died. But even now I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you." And Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." And Martha said to him, "I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day." And Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet he shall live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this?" And she said to him, "Yes, Lord. I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is coming into the world." This right here, guys. Jesus is the resurrection. Can you wrap that around your head? We probably can't, okay? We think of the resurrection as kind of like this power getting blasted at us when we die, right? But Jesus is the resurrection. It is Jesus himself resurrecting us with his incredible love, which is the power of God, which is the gospel. Okay. Jesus says, "I am the resurrection and the life. And though he die, he shall live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die." Never means never, guys. Do you believe this? She says, "Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is coming into the world." And when she had said this, she went and called her sister, Mary, saying in private, "The teacher's here, and he's calling for you." And when she heard it, she rose quickly and she went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come into the village, but was still in a place where Martha had met him. And when the Jews who were with her in the house, consoling her, saw Mary rise quickly and go out, they followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to weep there. So they see Mary pop up and run, and they just, they assume she's going to go and cry near the tomb. Now when Mary came to Jesus, where Jesus was, and she saw him, she fell at his feet and she said to him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would have not died." And when Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in his spirit and greatly troubled. And he said, "Where have you laid him?" And they said, "Lord, come and see." And Jesus wept. So the Jews said, "See how he loved him." But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man also have kept this man from dying?" Then Jesus, deeply moved again, came to the tomb. It was a cave, a stone laid against it. And Jesus said, "Take away the stone." And Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, "Lord, by this time there will be an odor. He has been dead for 4 days." Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. And Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this on account of the people standing around, that they may believe that you sent me." And when he said these things, he cried out with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." And the man who had died came out, his hands and his feet bound with linen strips, and his face wrapped with a cloth. And Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." So I want to go back real quick, guys. John 11:35 here, Jesus wept. Jesus wept, guys. No one would ever invent the idea of a God who cries. Nobody, if they were going back to rewrite history about this God they made up, would say, yeah, and then he was crying over there with everybody else. God became human and he experienced humanity completely and fully. He didn't block off a part of his brain that was purely God or something like that. It is union here. He was 100% human being, and he felt the emotions, the grief, the sadness. Knowing full well what he was about to do, he related completely to those who were grieving. And it's the same with us. It's the same with us when we grieve our loved ones, when we grieve losses and things like that, knowing that Jesus is going to restore it and make all things right and all things new. He grieves with us. He lives with us. And this is what it means to be human. Guys, don't let... Jesus is the true human. Don't let anybody tell you that crying is weak or expressing yourself is unwelcome. To do so is to be human. How do we know this? Well, the true human, the blueprint, did this. He exemplified this for us. He's not just an example for us, he's an example of us. All right. So anyways, unbind him and let him go, is what Jesus says. Now many of the Jews, therefore, who had come with Mary and had seen what he did, believed in him. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. Can you imagine that? Raises a man from the dead, and the religious, the separatists, those who just absolutely refuse to trust in their God-given identity, they go and they tell the religious leaders and the chief priests and the Pharisees, and they tell them what Jesus has done. So the chief priests and the Pharisees gather the council and says, "What are we to do? This man performs many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and the Romans will come and take away both our place and our nation." Isn't that interesting? They were threatened by this idea that, hey, if everybody trusts in him, the Romans are going to come and take this over, and we're going to lose our power and position and all that stuff. But one of them, Caiaphas, who was the high priest that year, said to them, "You know nothing at all. Nor do you understand that it is better for you that one man should die for the people, not that the whole nation should perish." You nailed it right there. And somebody asked me about that yesterday, the Antichrist spirit. But you're right. So here's what it says in the Mirror version, guys. "If we let him alone, everyone will believe in him. And then the Romans will come and dispossess us from our land and our national heritage." Feeling threatened rather than endorsed in their core identity, thus missing the entire point of the Messiah's mission, right? Anyone who believes in Jesus recognizes their core, their origin in him, but they didn't believe. So what does that mean? They were threatened. They were threatened. And one of them, Caiaphas, who was the high priest, said, "You don't know what you're talking about. If you merely reasoned about this, you would have known that it is to our advantage that one should die instead of the entire nation. And he said this without realizing that in the office of the high priest, he was prophesying Jesus' sacrificial death as the scapegoat of the entire nation, right? See, Caiaphas said that without even realizing what he was saying. He's prophesying that Jesus would die for the entire nation. And this was not for Israel only, but in Jesus laying down his life as the true shepherd of mankind, he would lead together into one family all the children of God from wherever they have been scattered, into places and circumstances where they have lost their true identity. His death would bring closure to every lie that mankind believed about themselves, right? That's the destruction and the defeat of sin, believing lies about yourself. Then from that day on, they took counsel to put Jesus to death. Jesus no longer walked openly among the Jews, but he went from there to the region near the wilderness to a town called Ephraim, and there he stayed with the disciples. Now the Passover of the Jews was at hand, and many went up from the country to Jerusalem before the Passover to purify themselves. They were looking for Jesus and saying to one another as they stood in the temple, "What do you think? That he will not come to the feast at all?" Now the chief priests and the Pharisees had given orders that if anyone knew where he was, he should let them know so that they might arrest him. And that wraps John chapter 11. Incredible chapter, guys. Packed with so much stuff. I am the resurrection and the life. Jesus weeps. Jesus wept. So much good stuff. So much good stuff. The raising of Lazarus is secondary to the revealing of our identity in Jesus. Yeah, right on. It was good. It was good. You got it, Tanya. Thank you. Walk and Woke, appreciate you. So, we're building here, guys. John's building towards the crucifixion. It's coming. So, there we go. But great chapter, great stuff. I love the book of John, the Gospel of John. One of my favorites. People always ask me if they're new. Hey, brother, let me see what this says. Dude, love my buddy, big bearded Bennett, guys. I've known him for years. Brother, I love hearing that, man. Thank you for sharing that with me. And hey, dude, join us anytime, man. Feel free to pop in. Share with us whatever's going on in your head, in your heart, and anything you're reading. But dude, yeah, it all starts with prayer, guys. We sit back in our chairs at home and we get it out, what's on our mind, knowing that God lives in us, right? He hears us. He relates to us. He comforts us. So I love to hear that, brother. Thank you for sharing, man. And I always appreciate